Hello and welcome to Dining with Death, True Crime Tuesday. A few years ago, something strange and terrifying began to happen. It was 2016, and suddenly, and for reasons unknown to most of us, people begin seeing clowns in places clowns should not be. They are standing in the woods, they are walking along the sidewalks at night, they're appearing in people's backyards. People are glued to their TV sets as each night the news reports one clown sighting after another. Conspiracy theories pop up, because of course they do. People begin stating that they'll shoot clowns on sight, and the whole thing is just pretty creepy. But did you know that decades before this unsettling event, there was a real killer clown? One day, a Florida woman opened her front door to see a clown standing on her doorstep holding flowers and balloons. When the clown walked away from the house, that woman was dead in the entryway of her home. This is the story of the killer clown. Let's get into it. April 27, 1972. Michael Warren and Marlene Arenas are married. They are a happy couple, they are in love, and they embark on their new life together. Marlene was only 20 years old, but already had two small sons from a previous marriage. Michael was a wonderful father to the boys, Johnny and Joe. In the late 1980s, the Warrens, who were doing very well for themselves, moved to a place called the Aero Club in Wellington, Florida. This is a very unique community for people with their own private planes, and each home in that community has access to its own private runway. Mike and Marlene owned quite a few businesses, including a used car lot, a car rental business, and several rental properties around Palm Beach, Florida, that brought in quite a bit of income for the family. They not only owned their own plane, but had expensive racehorses as well. The family was living the absolute dream when tragedy struck them. In 1988, the couple's son Johnny was killed in a car accident at only 22 years old. Their surviving son Joe would later say that Johnny's death changed everything for the family. Mike and Marlene began to grow apart. Grief does strange things to people, and everyone in the family was suffering. Mike wasn't around much anymore. He found ways to busy himself in order to avoid going home. Marlene was unhappy, and soon the marriage was unhappy. Marlene wondered if Mike was seeing other women. He was gone a great deal of the time. She thought he had to be cheating on her. Unfortunately, as it usually is, Marlene's intuition was right on. May 26, 1990. It was a beautiful Saturday in Florida. Marlene is at home doing some household chores when the doorbell rings. She opens her front door to see someone dressed as a clown standing on her doorstep. The clown is holding this flower arrangement in one hand and these balloons in the other. Marlene is surprised, as it isn't her birthday or anyone in the home's birthday. It's not a holiday, so she is curious as to see who sent the flowers and the balloons. But she doesn't even have time to ask. The clown hands Marlene the flowers and the balloons, and then pulls out a gun and shoots Marlene Warren in the face. Marlene falls to the floor of her entryway. The gunshot gets the attention of nearby neighbors, and they look to see where the sound came from. They are horrified to see a clown calmly walking away from Mike and Marlene's doorstep. The clown gets into this white Chrysler LeBaron and drives away. Poor Joe, who has already lost his brother, witnesses his mother's shooting. He and three of his friends were in the home at the time, and they rushed to her aid and then called 911. Marlene is taken to Palms West Hospital, and doctors do everything they can to try and save her. For 2 days, they monitor her before coming to the conclusion that there is no chance of her ever waking up, and the family takes her off of life support. Marlene was dead at only 40 years old. Police arrive immediately at the home and begin their investigation. This is a wealthy neighborhood, and people in the area are not at all accustomed to violent crime. The neighbors begin speaking among themselves as to what could have happened, and many people are already pointing the finger in one direction: Michael Warren. About 3 hours after the shooting, an anonymous phone call comes into the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Department. The caller tells authorities that Mike Warren is behind the murder and that he has a girlfriend. Police begin to look for Mike Warren. When they find him, he has what appears to be an airtight alibi. He was in a car hours away with a group of friends driving to a racetrack for a horse race. Investigators begin going through the home, but they don't find much that will help them inside the home. You can see police walking through the house here, taking photos and anything that may help them in their investigation. Marlene's sewing machine is in the dining room. There are plates of food in the kitchen. It's just a normal home. Mike hurries back to the house, playing the concerned husband, but he is not aware that the anonymous caller didn't just say Mike has a girlfriend. The caller named the girlfriend. This is Sheila Keene. She worked for Michael Warren at one of his businesses. 26-year-old Sheila and Michael were having an affair. People knew about it. They talked about it, but Marlene didn't know. Sheila had been married to a man named Richard Keene from 1987 to 1990. In January of 1990, Sheila had Richard arrested for domestic violence. She then moved out of their Loxahatchee home and into an apartment. Well, Michael Warren was paying the rent on that apartment. Investigators then locate Sheila. They interview Sheila and they interview Michael. Both of them vehemently deny that they are having an affair, but that is not what police believe. Police then decide to try and link Sheila or Michael to the clown. They take the flowers and the balloons into evidence and begin going from florist to florist, from supermarket to supermarket, until they find a florist that tells them, yes, that basket and that arrangement came from our store. Just a couple of days into the investigation, authorities know that the flowers and the balloons came from this Publix supermarket in the area. They find the Publix employee that sold the floral arrangement and the balloons and show them a photo of Sheila Keene. The employee tells them, yes, that looks like the woman who made the purchase. Investigators then head to the party rental store in the area. It was called the Spotlight. They speak with the owner of the store, who is happy to assist and pulls out her receipt book. As you can see here, on May 25th, 1990, just a day before the murder, a clown costume, a wig, and makeup were purchased for $68.37. The employees at the party supply store tell detectives that the woman who made the purchase had long brown hair. So you think you know where this is heading, right? Well, stay tuned, my friends. About 4 days after the murder, investigators locate the white Chrysler LeBaron that Joe and others had seen in the driveway and had then seen the clown get into and drive away. I think if you're going to commit a murder, you don't want to be driving around the town dressed as a clown? Maybe that's just me, but I don't think that would be my choice. The car was just sitting unattended here in the parking lot of a Winn-Dixie about 8 miles away from the crime scene. Police do a forensic search of the car, and they find some long brown hairs, as well as some orange fibers, similar to fibers that would be in a cheap wig like a clown would wear. Police are then able to link the car through its VIN number and the paperwork required to transfer ownership of a vehicle to Michael Warren's used car lot. The car came from the Warrens' car lot. I'm not going to go on too long of a tangent here, but guys, if we had to register our guns like we have to register our cars, if we had a process in place to track guns like we track cars, just think about how much easier it would be to link guns to crimes. I am a responsible gun owner, and the responsible gun owners I know have no issue with that. Keep your guns, fine. I want to keep my guns, and I have absolutely no problem registering them because I'm not a criminal. I'm not planning anything criminal. No, we will never be able to track all the guns because it's too late for that. But it doesn't mean we should do nothing. It doesn't mean we shouldn't do better. We can always do better, right? Rant for the day. By the time they find the car, investigators have gathered enough evidence to procure a search warrant for Sheila Keene's apartment, the one that Mike Warren is paying for, and they arrive here at that apartment to execute the warrant. They take quite a few items into evidence, and among those items are several articles of clothing owned by Sheila. On a couple of tops, blouses, they find orange fibers that appear to match the orange fibers found in the LeBaron. Again, they are synthetic fibers like those used to make a cheap wig. This sounds pretty cut and dried to me, right? Yes, the evidence is somewhat circumstantial, but we've seen arrests made on much less. Well, there were no arrests made. Months go by, and then years go by. I saw on another YouTube channel when I was researching a bunch of information about how this mugshot was taken of Sheila, smiling, a very big smile right after the murder. But as you can clearly see, this photo was taken on November 7th, 1984, 6 years before the murder. So that is incorrect. Sheila must have been arrested for something else all those years before this event. I couldn't find anything that verified either Sheila or Mike were arrested during the time of this murder. Not even like arrested and then let go. We do know that Michael and Sheila were brought in for questioning on multiple occasions after the shooting, but it went cold. One of the biggest hurdles is the description given by Marlene's son, Joe. He told the police that the clown was tall, and he thought the clown was a man. We see this all the time in these cases. No matter how much people want to help, no matter how well-intentioned they are, more times than not, eyewitness testimony is simply not accurate. And here again, because the eyewitness gave a different description than that of their suspect, it really hindered the process of making an arrest of that suspect. I also found an interview with the current state attorney, Dave Ehrenberg, who stated that the prosecutors back then felt strongly that they just didn't have enough evidence against Mike and Sheila, and that they knew if they went to trial and couldn't make their case, a murderer, maybe two murderers, would go free forever, and they didn't want to risk that. That's understandable, and neither Sheila or Mike were arrested for the murder. I guess I just feel like, why does it then go cold for decades? Why don't they keep working it? I think that's my issue. But police are determined that someone is going to go down for this murder, and they begin to notice something as they look into just who Michael Warren is. October 26th, 1990. Police have begun investigating Mike Warren's business dealings. They've been able to gain access to some of his personal finances because of the murder, and what they find is pretty shocking. Michael Warren is running a small criminal enterprise. Basically, he sells used cars at his auto dealership at high interest rates for people with bad credit. Then, when the people default on those payments, Mike repossesses their cars, but he reports those cars as stolen. He is the title holder on the car because he is carrying the financing. When he reports the cars as stolen, he receives an insurance payout on the car because, like I said, he's the title holder. The more police look into Michael Warren, the longer the list of crimes becomes. And in October of 1990, he is arrested for racketeering, odometer tampering, and grand theft. 2 years later, when he goes to trial, he is convicted of 43 counts on those crimes. He goes to prison in March of 1994 and is released in December of 1997. While Michael is in prison, Sheila goes back and forth to her husband Richard, but in 1999, they finally divorce. On August 15, 2002, 12 years after the murder of Marlene Warren, Mike Warren and Sheila Keene get married in Las Vegas. Sheila changes her last name to Warren and also, from time to time, uses the name of Debbie for some reason. Mike and Sheila moved to Tennessee and opened this restaurant. It was a burger joint called the Purple Cow. The Warrens had moved on. They were living their lives as if nothing had happened, and the murder of Marlene was all just a distant memory. Well, Mike and Sheila may have moved on and put the murder out of their minds, and police did as well for a while with new cases coming into the department, but they never forgot about the murder. In 2014, the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office decided to reopen this cold case using a grant they received to pay for these types of investigations. They got $125,000 from the state to look into this murder. They set up a task force involving the sheriff's office, the state attorney, and the FBI. As part of this investigation, they decided to test all of the collected evidence, including the hairs and the fibers, the clothing, some items from the car, all of that for DNA. Luckily, everything had been properly stored and the items were still available for testing. We don't always see that. Unbelievably, sometimes evidence is lost or thrown away, but fortunately, proper procedure was followed in this old case and testing could be completed. This type of testing takes time, and as it moves along, Richard Keene, Sheila's first husband, dies. Cold cases face a myriad of obstacles, and of course, one of those is that people get old, their memories fade, and witnesses die. It takes several years to gather enough evidence, but finally, 27 years after the murder of Marlene Warren is committed, a Palm Beach grand jury indicts Sheila Keene Warren for first-degree murder. Several weeks after the indictment, an arrest warrant is issued and Sheila is picked up and put into custody in Washington County, Virginia by the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office. I'm just going to play this video of her arrest. There is no sound, but I think you guys will enjoy it. Watch her face and look at it and think about what must be running through her head. Kind of satisfying, right? The day after her arrest, Sheila waives extradition in Virginia and is returned to Palm Beach County to be booked into the jail. Here we see her arriving at that facility for incarceration. 2 days later, the state attorney, Dave Ehrenberg, announces that the state will seek the death penalty against Sheila Warren. But as the case proceeds and negotiations are made, he later announces that the state has changed its mind and will not be seeking the death penalty. Now, after the arrest, something very interesting happens. This man comes forward. His name is John Moran Jr., and he has quite the story to tell. Back in 1990, John Moran Jr.'s father not only worked for Michael Warren, he was one of Michael's close friends. His father was also Mike's accomplice in his criminal activity. John Moran Jr. tells authorities that on his deathbed, John Moran Sr. told his son something that might help him in the future. Back in 1990, after the murder, Michael Warren told John Moran Sr. to get rid of a car. Now, this is something they did all the time. They regularly repossessed cars and then made them disappear so they could collect that insurance money, like I said earlier. On the day that John Moran Sr. was to make this particular car disappear, he did not take his son with him. In fact, John Moran Jr. said his father wouldn't even let him near the car. He didn't want him to touch it. Well, this was because this car was the second getaway car used after the murder. The white LeBaron had been ditched in the parking lot, and then Sheila got into this second car to try and throw the police off. One evening, John Moran Sr. had his son follow him as he drove the car from one location out to this canal. John Moran Sr. drove the car out to the river and drove it off an embankment. In that car, a clown costume, and several other articles of clothing. John Jr. then watched as his father pulled a gun from his pocket and threw the gun in the river after the car. Years later, on his deathbed, John Moran Sr. told his son, "You remember that car, the one I told you never to touch? You can use that to get whatever you want from Mike Warren at any time. If you ever need money, if you're ever in trouble, all you have to do is tell Mike that you know about that car, that you know where it is, and he'll give you whatever you want." Now, of course, John Moran Jr. knew about the murder later on, but he chooses not to come forward until Sheila is arrested, until he can no longer really hold this ace in the hole. John Moran Jr. then told the police where they could find the car. The police obtained a search warrant for the area of the canal that John Moran Jr. sent them to. They did, in fact, pull a very rusted vehicle from the water. You can see here that the car, a 1982 Audi 4000S, is basically just a rusty shell almost 30 years later. There were no items of clothing in the car, and of course there was no clown costume. Too much time had gone by. I found a police report on the finding of the car that is heavily redacted. Most of it is blacked out. But it does say that they had to use the jaws of life to open the rusted car doors. Now, there is a chance that more evidence than I can share with you here was found in the car, but because the police reports are heavily censored, this is all we know. John Moran Jr. also tells the police that Michael Warren had once approached him and his father and said to them, "Can't you make Marlene disappear like you make those cars disappear?" John said at the time he took it as a bad joke. Getting rid of repossessed cars was a once-a-week thing for them, and he knew Mike and Marlene were having troubles, he just didn't take the comments seriously. There's also something else you should know. Marlene Warren loved clowns. Everyone knew this. People that worked in Mike's business knew this. Their neighbors knew this. Marlene loved clowns so much that she painted them. This here is one of Marlene's paintings, and she collected other people's paintings of clowns as well. So when John Moran comes forward with this story about the cars, he also tells authorities that the fact that Sheila had dressed as a clown to go and murder Marlene was a very sick, very depraved inside joke between she and Mike. They knew this poor woman loved clowns. As Sheila sits in jail awaiting trial, Michael Warren gets very vocal. He is seething with anger every time he speaks to reporters, and he's talking to anyone who will listen. He tells one news outlet, "It's sad that, they try to make someone guilty that's not guilty. It's not right." Michael Warren said, "If there is any justice in this world whatsoever, she will be a free woman after the trial is over." To another outlet, he said, "How did they ever get enough fake bullshit evidence to get a grand jury to indict on this? They didn't have no new evidence. It's crazy." Is it though? There was quite a bit of legal wrangling, and Sheila's trial was delayed twice. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. She was denied bail and sat in prison as the courts shut down and all the proceedings came to a halt. Her trial was scheduled to begin in late 2021, but was then delayed again. Her attorneys strongly proclaim her innocence to the media, and Mike has come forward saying they didn't have anything then and they don't have anything now. As you can imagine, Marlene's family is more than ready for this entire event to have some type of closure.
Only on 5, a son's 3-decade-long wait for closure in an infamous murder case. For a 6th time, the trial again delayed in the Wellington killer clown case. As it has been known, it was in 1990 that Marlene Warren was shot after opening her front door, a crime that forever changed her family. Only WPTV's Megan McRoberts was able to sit down with her son and talk about the trial delays and the lasting impact.
Well, when you've already waited more than 30 years, Joe Aaron says that he is tired of waiting, but his attorney says it could be as little as 4 months or even next year until there is a new trial date. When that day comes, Joe says that he will sit through every second of the trial.
My mom was an angel.
Joe Aaron's final day with his mom was almost exactly 32 years ago.
We were best friends.
Even decades later, his memory of her kindness is crisp.
I look at myself and I still see her in me. The eyes, the smile.
Aaron hasn't spoken publicly about his mom since she was killed.
Well, I was so shut down inside, I didn't want to talk. I couldn't talk. I am ready.
It was May 26th of 1990 at their home in Wellington.
It was just a regular morning. We were planning the day and eating breakfast.
Aaron's was home with his mom, Marlene, and some friends. There was a knock on the door.
Were you the first to find your mom?
We were pretty much all together. Right there at the door, and she answered it.
Marlene greeted by a person in a clown costume with balloons and a bouquet of flowers. Investigators said the clown pulled out a gun, shot Marlene, and walked calmly back to their car. Marlene died 2 days later.
I felt my heart, my soul just get ripped out of my body.
Joe was just 20 at the time, an aspiring pilot, getting ready for college. Losing his mom changed his life's trajectory for the worse.
At first, I did not know what was going on, what was up or down.
He long struggled with substance abuse.
I was holding on to the anger and the animosity, and it was just ruthless.
It took decades to accept he might not get closure.
One of the detectives, Williams, told me, we're going to find out who did this no matter what, even if it takes 25 years.
But hope did come at 27 years. Sheila Warren was arrested in Virginia thanks to improved DNA technology. She was living there with Michael Warren, Marlene's husband, at the time of the murder. The two were married nearly a decade after Sheila Warren was accused of killing Marlene.
She took my life out of selfishness and greed.
Warren's trial was set to begin this week, but her attorneys asked for more time to gather witnesses and review more evidence.
So aggravating.
Tough news, as Joe says he's already waited long enough.
They need to do something soon so I can go on with my life.
Hopeful to see a conviction this year that he's dreamed of for decades.
I want the truth and, an end to this tragic thing.
Joe tells me that if he could say anything to Sheila, it would be that she could still get help, and that quote, if she reaches out to God, she might get it. He says he has found purpose by working with rehabilitation centers, helping other people with addictions and their personal struggles.
As it stands right now, the trial for Sheila Keene Warren is set to begin on October 21st, 2022, just not long after this video will post. The trial has been delayed now 6 times, and both sides say they are anxious to get it over with. I wanted to bring you this story now so that we could review it, and then when the trial is over, I will bring you an update letting you know the outcome. So for now, we wait. I want to know what you think about this case, and I want to know what you think will happen at the trial. Did Sheila Keene dress as a clown all those years ago as part of some sick and twisted inside joke? Did she drive to Marlene Warren's home and murder her? Let me know what you think. I, for one, am very much looking forward to the jury's verdict. I hope they see things the way I do, but you never know. Juries do some surprising things at times. Thank you for joining me today on Dining with Death, True Crime Tuesday. Hit that like button if you liked the video and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me. You can also join my Patreon. That helps a lot and you will get some bonus content. Stay safe and be kind to each other, and I'll see you next time on Dining with Death. Bye.